The year began with mild but wet days, with some sunshine in between. Typical winter weather when the westerly winds blow. At least the mild weather helped to keep the energy bills down. The ground was pretty wet underfoot, and I was very surprised to bump into this person one morning, walking around in bare feet. I presume he was forest bathing. I hope he didn't tread on any holly leaves. Speaking of holly, before Christmas I hardly saw a hollyberry on the holly bushes. Then, in the first week of January, I came upon this holly bush, covered in berries. I wonder why the birds haven't eaten them. The sunny days were welcomed by the animals. Do you notice that the fallow deer at the back only has one antler? I think this one's too posh to wash. The mild days in the first half of January brought on some early bird song. I heard several birds, including the beautiful song thrush, which is always one of the earliest singers. In the middle of January, the weather turned much colder and the birds went quiet. Apart from the heavy frosts, we had some lovely sunrises. These are beautifully captured here in these images by Annette Gregory. This looks like spring water flowing into a stream. In fact, it's a water leak. The icy weather caused problems with water leaks and drains bursting. Here's another one, coming up through the tarmac. The water that leaked flowed into the drainage ditch and eventually joined the River Test. The burst caused more potholes in the road. The rising main in Copythorne also began to leak, and the waste had to be pumped away, using a fleet of 12 tankers, which caused a few hold-ups. The tankers were soon replaced by a large temporary pipe that closed the road and ran from one end of Pollards Moor Road to the other, nearly a kilometre of pipework. On and on it goes, until it joins back to the main drainage. It's easy to forget what goes on under our feet that we take for granted until it goes wrong. Late January and early February were milder and quite dry. February the 2nd is Candlemas Day. There's a weather rhyme associated with Candlemas Day. If Candlemas Day be fair and bright, winter will have another fight. If Candlemas Day bring cloud and rain, winter won't come back again. Well, Candlemas Day this year was somewhere in between, but more on the fair and bright side, with no rain. So perhaps we've got more winter to come. The ponies will be hoping for spring to arrive. When grazing's limited, they eat the leaves on the holly and the gorse. These ponies waded into one of the many boggy areas to reach some grass. But don't worry, they managed to get out okay. Oh, what's this? This is one of the foreign interlopers that I mentioned at the beginning of this video. We escaped winter for a couple of weeks and went to Costa Rica to see some tropical wildlife. If you're interested in what we saw, there's a link to the first video at the top of the page and in the text below. As February progressed, the spring flowers started to appear, helped by the mild weather. Then we had another cold spell that put the flowers back a bit. The cold spell lasted for about a week, and then on February the 19th we had a glorious sunny warm day. I saw an early yellow brimstone butterfly fluttering around. These are usually the first butterflies to appear, but I've never seen one this early before. I was even more surprised to see 2 red admirals. I hope they find somewhere to shelter from the cold nights. This became a common sound in the last couple of weeks of February. It's a woodpecker, of course, but I don't know which one. I was out walking one day and came upon these. The white ones aren't albinos. White is a recognised colour variation of fallow deer. Sorry about the quality. It was filmed on my phone camera, which focused on the branches and not the deer. Down at Keyhaven on the coast, Alan Forder saw a spoonbill amongst many other birds. Spoonbills used to be a very rare visitor to our area, but they've become more frequent in recent years. I still haven't managed to see one yet though. While we're down on the coast, do you remember from the last video diary that Thor the walrus turned up on Calshot Beach in December? Well, at the end of February, he's arrived in Iceland. He's well on his way back to the Arctic Circle after his holiday in the English Channel. On February the 27th, I went back to see if the holly bush still had berries. And it did. It's still covered in red berries. There was even a blackbird in the bush when I took the photo, which was showing no interest in the berries at all. I think they must be very sour. And that brings us to the end of February, which has been the driest February in England for 30 years. Let's hope we don't have a washout summer. In the last version of the video diary, we saw Alan Forder's great pictures of a spoonbill down at Lymington. I thought I'd pop down there and see if I could see a spoonbill myself. Of course, I didn't see one, but I did see lots of other birds. And here's some of them. I think I've identified them correctly. This is a turnstone. These are winter visitors from Northern Europe and Canada. These busy little birds are sandpipers. This is another winter visitor to the south coast. This is a redshank. Some of these migrate here from Iceland, but others live here all year round and nest here. This majestic bird standing on the bank is a little egret. These are fairly common along the south coast now, but they've only been living in England since 1989. This is unmistakably a curlew with its long curved beak. The curlew is one of the birds that nests on the ground in the New Forest, and its numbers are declining so much that it's now on the red list. And this is a male widgeon, another winter visitor from Scandinavia and Iceland. And here's his mate come to join him. So I didn't manage to see a spoonbill, but I did see several other interesting birds. When I went to look for the spoonbill down at Lymington, I walked through the boatyard. Lots of work going on to prepare the boats for the coming season. This one's gift wrapped, ready to go to its new owner. I also walked past the seawater baths, which are empty for safety reasons, as the baths are closed out of season. This is the oldest outdoor seawater baths in the UK. In the summer season, the baths look like this. In the last diary, we saw the man that I'd met in the forest who wasn't wearing any boots. I read recently in the Lymington Times of a man who only wears his boots in the forest, but nothing else. He's a naked rambler. I believe that he's been spoken to by the police. Walking around naked in the forest is an odd thing to do, especially in the cold weather. If it was me, I think I'd wait until the weather warmed up. The first week of March was cold but dry. The second week was cold and wet. On March the 8th, we actually had some snow. Out on my walk, I heard a lone song thrush, singing his heart out. The snow soon melted, and the second half of March was a bit warmer, but with loads of rain. The ground was wet again. March is the start of the birds' nesting season, and this includes the rare ground nesting birds, which nest in the open heath areas of the forest. These are species like curlews and redshanks that we saw earlier, and snipe, lapwings and others. If you're walking your dogs in these open forest areas, make sure they're under control at all times and keep them on the paths. In case you're not sure which sort of areas you should avoid, it's the open forest areas like this, which you'll see throughout the New Forest. The spring flowers were in full bloom by the end of March, and I think the cooler than usual weather helped them to flower for longer than usual. After the driest February on record, March was the wettest March for 40 years, and also had the lowest amount of sunshine on record. It was also chilly. Well, I hope you're enjoying the video so far. If you are, please give us a like and subscribe to our channel. Thanks very much. April began with slightly warmer weather, but we had a lovely sunny Easter until the Bank Holiday Monday washout. The New Forest Reptile Centre opened for the first time this year for the 2 weeks of the school holidays at Easter. The reptiles have all woken up from their hibernation and taking advantage of the sun when it was out. If you visit the Reptile Centre, you'll see that all the reptiles live in their own outdoor environment. These are called pods. Each pod is covered with netting to stop predators eating the reptiles. The netting also stops people putting their hands in to try and touch the reptiles. Definitely not advised at the adder pod. At this time of year, the deer shed their winter coats. You can see these fallow deer, filmed in the woods in late April, looking a bit moth-eaten. No look back at March and April would be complete without a mention of the dawn chorus. At this time of year, the male birds sing to attract a mate and to defend their territory. This is the mating season for birds, and this was beautifully captured by Anne Hall. Here's a female mallard with her ducklings that have recently hatched. Sadly, most of these ducklings will end up as lunch for a predator's chicks. Nature's food chain seems very cruel at times. Now back to the opening sequence of this video. There are signs in most of the public car parks in the New Forest and other areas asking people not to touch the ponies. But still, people do touch the ponies. This child was very nearly injured. It was filmed by commoner and New Forest author Sally Marsh. This just shows how quickly somebody can be injured. You can also now be fined for feeding or petting the ponies. So if you visit the New Forest, enjoy looking at the ponies, but don't go too near them. They are wild animals. I've put a link to Sally's book website and her Facebook page in the text below. Have a look. If you like the forest and ponies, you'll probably be interested in Sally's books. And that brings us to the end of our look back at some of the things that went on in the New Forest during March and April. In early May, I came across quite a large herd of fallow deer in the woods. This is a good view of a pricket. A pricket is a deer in its second year, growing his first set of antlers that don't have any branches yet. We can also see that he's molting and growing his summer coat. The herd soon ran off. Can you spot the white one? On the 9th of May, 18 new forest stallions were let out onto the forest to meet up with the mares and make their acquaintance. The stallions are out on the forest until the 10th of July. As always, please give them a wide berth, as all ponies' behaviour during this time will be unpredictable. Here's one of the stallions, photographed by Annette Gregory. He didn't waste any time making an acquaintance with a mare. The results of last year's stallion release can be seen across the forest now. May and June are the peak time of year for foals to be born, and they're a common sight. If you go to see them, please remember not to get too close, and definitely don't try to pet them or feed them. They are wild animals. New Forest commoner Sally Marsh hadn't been able to locate one of her Forest Run ponies for nearly a year. In May, Sally was contacted by the local Agister to say that he had seen the mare. Sally headed down to a huge bog area to see if she could find her mare, called Freebie. Lo and behold, there she was, and she had a foal. This is Freebie's first foal, and she's 13 years old. What a lovely story. On the 6th of May, we had the coronation of King Charles III in Westminster Abbey. Not only was this a great spectacle that Britain does so well, we also had an extra bank holiday. For the first time ever, I think, we had 3 bank holidays during May, which was a nice boost to the tourism businesses in the forest. Down on the coast, everyone was getting ready for the summer season, with cafes and restaurants gearing up for the increased number of visitors. Beach huts were opening up, and the fishermen were looking forward to increased sales. I think this seagull was looking forward to stealing some chips. Due to the colder than normal weather in April and early May, the leaves appeared on the trees later this year. By mid-May though, the forest was transformed. The beech trees are wind-pollinated and have both male and female flowers on the same tree. Its tassel-like male catkins hang from the tips of the twigs in April or May, whilst the female flowers are surrounded by a cup, which eventually will become beech nuts, or masts as they're known. By late May, the floor of the forest in the beechwoods was covered in these female flowers, which had fallen from the trees. These won't produce seeds, of course, but there are plenty of seeds still on the trees, which will develop throughout the summer. Although May started off quite cold, the weather warmed up in the middle of the month, and we had some lovely warm sunny days. During May we had No Mow May, encouraging us to leave grass growing to help the insects and to provide more pollen for the bees. The roadside verges were left unmown, where it was safe to do so. I'm sure it also helped the council's mowing budget too. A win-win. Because of the cool spring weather, the flowers were later this year, but some of the floral displays have been fantastic. The maythorn flowers have been as bright and as fresh as I've ever seen them. There's an old saying, "Ne'er cast a clout until May is out," which translated into modern language is something like, "Don't put your coat and jumper away until May is out." I've always thought this referred to the end of May. It could, though, refer to the flowers of the hawthorn, which is also known as maythorn. With the cool weather lasting until the middle of May this year, "Ne'er cast a clout until the May flowers are out," in bloom, sounds about right. The first public pony sale in the New Forest for 3 years was held at the purpose-built facility at Bewley Road. It was the first sale to be held in person since COVID arrived. These pictures, by Annette Gregory, show some of the ponies that were up for sale. What do Rome, Barcelona and Doctor Who have in common with the New Forest? They've all got their own Monopoly board. Yes, the New Forest version of Monopoly has been launched, featuring local landmarks and organisations, as well as the animals and nature in the forest. If you need a present for someone who likes the New Forest, this might be just the thing you're looking for. Do you know what this is? This is a gorse bush covered in dodder and was photographed by Mary Ann Murphy. Dodder is a parasitic plant that entwines itself on a host plant, it always entwines itself anti-clockwise. Don't know why. It gains its nutrition from the host plant. It's widespread across the New Forest, but it's not common. In June, we had a hot plume of air up from the Mediterranean, and we had some lovely hot days. Ideal for haymaking. We saw these one evening, just leaving the pub. That's the way to travel. This time last year we had a heat wave. The ground was parched. Not this year. After some lovely weather in June, it went downhill pretty rapidly during July and August. We had plenty of rain. July the 6th was the wettest July day on record. We also had some sunshine. And we had some of these. In mid-June, this stream was dry. By mid-July, it was running with water again, and it hasn't stopped since. Well, some would call this a typical British summer. Others might say it's been a bit of a disappointment. A much-loved member of the community passed away in July, and over 100 tractors and other vehicles formed a parade at his funeral in a touching tribute to him. During the summer, some of the open areas in the forest turn yellow for a short time. What are the yellow flowers? My plant app gave me some suggestions. Are the flowers rough hawkbit or scaly hawkbit? Perhaps they're autumn hawkbit, or maybe smooth hawksbeard. Or perhaps they're perennial sow thistles. Or even bristly ox tongue. Or several other suggestions. It could be a combination of these. The most likely though, I'm told, is autumn hawkbit. If you know better, please add a comment below. The New Forest has suffered from wildfires, often started by people who've had a barbecue. Also, people feeding the ponies and donkeys encourages them to come near the car park and roads, sometimes with fatal consequences. Because of this, the local rules have been modified, so that now the use of barbecues and fires in the forest and feeding and petting of the ponies or donkeys are all banned, with those failing to comply liable to a fixed penalty fine or prosecution. So please take notice and keep to the rules. The wet weather seemed to encourage the fungi to grow. There were quite a few fungi around, more than I would have expected in July. There were lots of festivals to go to, including the Lymington Seafood Festival, the New Forest Food Festival, and of course the New Forest and Hampshire County Show. The weather was a bit hit and miss, but that didn't put off the thousands of visitors who found plenty to see and do and generally enjoy the festivities. From mid-July to August the 6th, the butterfly conservation people ran the Big Butterfly Count. Participants were asked to sit somewhere for 15 minutes and count the number of butterflies that they saw. Lots of people in the New Forest got involved, including me. I sat by the flower bed in our garden and saw 7 large whites, 8 small whites, 2 red admirals, 2 peacocks, 1 holly blue, and 1 Jersey tiger, which is actually a moth. All in 15 minutes. I was particularly pleased to see the Jersey tiger moth, as I've never seen one of these before, and I didn't know what it was when I saw it. It was rare in Hampshire until the last couple of decades, when it's been expanding its range. Overall, in the big butterfly count, there were nearly 136,000 surveys. Great to see the red admiral doing so well. If you want to encourage red admirals, peacocks and other butterflies and bees into your garden, plant a laburnum bush. They love the nectar in the flowers. Another moth that I didn't see in the survey is the box tree moth, which was first seen in Britain in 2007. It's a handsome moth. Its caterpillar stage, though, isn't likely to win many friends. The caterpillars were first seen in private gardens in Britain in 2011. The caterpillars were first seen in our garden this year. The moths lay their eggs in box bushes and the caterpillars eat the box leaves. Box hedges all over southern England are being ruined. The caterpillars are difficult to get rid of, so I can see box hedges becoming a rarity in English gardens. A great shame. At this time of year, the red deer and the fallow deer in the forest are still growing their new antlers, ready for their rutting season in the autumn. The antlers are still covered in a furry skin called velvet. The deer are said to be in velvet. The roe deer have their rutting season in June and July, so their antlers are fully formed now. There are several groups of litter pickers across the New Forest who are kept busy, mainly by selfish people throwing their litter out of the car window. In August, the litter pickers in our parish of Copythorne celebrated a milestone, if celebration is the right word. After 4 years, in one small parish in the New Forest, we've collected 2,500 bags of rubbish, which equates to about 10 tonnes. It's a shocking statistic, isn't it? As August drew on, the bracken started to turn brown. On the heathlands, a glorious purple glow appeared as the heather flowered, both of which are signs that autumn's just round the corner. Local beekeepers put hives out on the heaths so that the bees can collect the pollen to make the very popular New Forest heather honey. These birds' eggs are wood pigeons' eggs, which have just hatched out. These photos were taken on the 26th of August, which seems very late in the year for birds' eggs to be hatching. In fact, the wood pigeon has several broods in a year and has been recorded as having bred in every month of the year. No wonder there's so many pigeons around. As we come to the end of August, the foals that were born in May are growing fast. The donkeys are still holding up the traffic, and Edith and I are still walking in the forest. After a damp and disappointing July and August, the kids went back to school at the beginning of September. Then the sun came out and we had some glorious weather. You might recall in the last diary that we saw the fallow deer growing their antlers, which were covered in a velvety coat. Towards the end of summer, the blood supply to the velvet is cut off, and the deer rub the velvet covering off of their antlers in readiness for the rut. More of that later. Annette Gregory captured these images of some fallow deer bucks whilst they were in the midst of rubbing off the velvet. Looks pretty gruesome, doesn't it? But it's not thought to be painful, more an itch. Early in September, Keith Mantle came across this grass snake sunbathing in a gorse bush. If we look closely, we can see that its eye is cloudy. This is a sign that the snake is about to slough its skin. Snakes slough their skin several times a year, and the covering of the eye comes off with the rest of the skin. Do you know what this is? It's about 10 centimetres long. That's about 4 inches in old money. It's already spent up to 5 years living in a tree trunk. It's looking for a suitable place to pupate on the ground, wrapping itself in a soil cocoon. Next year, it'll look like this. It's a goat moth. It gets its name from the musky goat-like smell of the caterpillar. Adults are on the wing in June and July. Look for them in woodland near oak and ash trees, but you'll need a keen eye to spot them. Marion Nesbitt captured these wonderful pictures of wasp spiders. It's a risky business being a male wasp spider. After mating, the much larger female is very likely to have him for her lunch. This little one was one of the luckier ones, and after mating with the much larger female, he made good his escape. Once her eggs have been fertilised, the female constructs a beautiful flask-like sac in which her spiderlings will hatch and spend the winter, emerging the following spring. Their mother won't live to see them though, as, with her life's purpose fulfilled, she dies in the autumn. The first misty mornings arrived in mid-September. Autumn's on its way. Autumn means the fungi season. There are about 2,700 recorded species of fungi in the New Forest, which makes the forest one of the most important fungi habitats in the country. We're all familiar with the fungi shaped like mushrooms, of various shapes, sizes and colours. Some are edible, some are poisonous, a few could kill you. Many of the fungi that we can see are tiny. Here's a small tree stump with fungi growing on it. If I put my finger next to one of the fungi, we can see how small it is. This is a yellow stag's horn fungus, also known as a jelly antler fungus. Although these are tiny, they've been known to grow up to about 10 centimetres tall. Here are some other small fungi to look out for. These are ink caps. See how quickly they grow, and then they're gone. October overall was very mild, but we had some heavy rain on some days. This fungi was growing well one day. The next day, we had one of the days with heavy storms. Most of the fungi growth didn't survive. In early October, Lyndhurst held its annual Scarecrow Festival to raise money for local charities. A map showed where all the scarecrows could be found, and it was an extremely popular family event, helped by some glorious sunny weather all weekend. This is a selection of the scarecrows that we saw. Many of them were very creative. The winning entry was this one, the Lyndhurst Tug of War team, which was really well done. Tina Dunning came upon this in October. An apple. Yes, it's an apple, but it's what's sitting on top of the apple that's important. It's an Asian hornet. It's an extremely aggressive predator, and a colony of Asian hornets can kill off a hive of honeybees in hours. The first Asian hornet's nest in Hampshire was found in 2018. If you see one, you should notify the authorities. There's a government app to do this called Asian Hornet Watch. I've added details about that in the text below. This is the rutting season for the red deer, the seeker deer and the fallow deer. These pictures of the red deer, by Annette Gregory, beautifully capture the rut in progress, with the dominant stag fighting off the challengers to his harem. This is a fallow buck with his ladies. I actually filmed this last year, but I thought it was worth another airing. The younger or weaker fallow bucks that don't have any does tend to hang around together near the main gathering, hoping to lure one of the does away from the dominant bucks. Sometimes their luck's in. Autumn is the time of year when the acorns fall from the oak trees. The ponies and the donkeys are quick to eat the acorns, but eating too many of them can cause problems for the animals. They don't make the pigs ill though, and so the pigs are let out onto the forest in the autumn to eat many of the acorns, to prevent the other animals from eating too many. About 600 pigs of all sizes were let out this year. This is called the pannage, and is a New Forest tradition that goes all the way back to the time of William the Conqueror. almost 1,000 years. The last days of October were showery, but still mild. Last year I hardly saw any hollyberries on the bushes. As October drew to a close this year, there were loads of hollyberries on most of the female holly trees. Good for the birds. The hollyberries and the golden brown bracken is an early reminder that Christmas is coming. November had a lively start, with Storm Kieran causing a lot of local flooding. It was very mild though, and this carried on for the first 3 weeks of the month. The panaging pigs were still out, eating the acorns. The deer rut was coming to an end, and the red deer stags and fallow deer bucks were soon all good friends again. Thanks to Annette Gregory for these pictures of the red deer. This is a time of year, of course, when the forest looks at its most photogenic, with the glorious autumn colours of the leaves. There was still a great variety of fungi still growing, helped I suspect by the mild autumn weather. These lovely photographs by Sarah Smith show a variety of fungi still growing in November. For those of you who believe in fairies, here's a work in progress fairy ring. I don't believe in fairies, of course. Oh, what was that? This is a time of year when a lot of annual maintenance in the forest is carried out. Hedge cutting and ditch clearing are usually near the top of the list. It's also the time of year when we remember those who have given their lives in wars. Towns and villages throughout the forest held very well attended parades and services of remembrance. Towards the end of November we had a short cold spell. Before that it was time to put our banana plants to bed. I cut off the leaves and covered the stems in fleece, which gives some protection against the frost. This is the latest that I've ever covered them up, which shows how mild the weather's been. The cold spell lasted for a few days. Some lucky people were flying south to find some warmer weather. The end of November and beginning of December were National Tree Week, and people were encouraged to get involved with tree planting. The New Forest has the highest concentration of ancient and veteran trees in Western Europe. Perhaps the most well known of these trees is the Knightwood Oak, which can be found to the west of Lyndhurst. This tree is the largest oak tree in the New Forest and is over 500 years old. There's a car park nearby and a well-made path suitable for pushchairs and wheelchairs. Whilst November and December were generally mild, we did have quite a lot of rain. The second week of December was particularly wet, causing more flooding in places. Down on the coast, the winter migrant birds have arrived. Thanks to Steve Laycock for these stunning images showing a range of the birds which can currently be seen, including some wonderful images of the spoonbills. Staying on the coast, this was washed up one day at Milford-on-Sea. Do you know what it is? It's a Portuguese man-of-war. They're primarily found in tropical and subtropical oceans, but over the past few years, more and more of these poisonous organisms have washed up on beaches from Cornwall along the coast to Hampshire, mainly in the autumn months. It's not a jellyfish, although it looks similar. It has tentacles which can reach 50 metres in length and can give you a very painful sting. December wouldn't be December these days without outside illuminations. They really get me into the Christmas spirit. Out in the forest, the ponies are finding whatever they can to eat. These ponies are eating holly leaves. The prickles don't seem to bother them. If you're driving through the forest, please be especially careful in the dark evenings and mornings. The leaves have now fallen from the trees and the branches are bare. Soon though, the sap will start to rise and the trees will be all ready to start the seasons all over again for another year. That brings us to the end of the 2023 New Forest Video Diaries. Please give us a like and consider subscribing to our channel. And thanks very much for watching. Happy New Year!